Welcome back to Tide Pod. Got a big show for everybody here for this week. Couple of different segments to run through. We're going to start with Tony. We'll have Brandon on to talk some recruiting stuff because we got signing day coming up next week. So that's going to be huge. So Brandon will have a long recruiting update for us later. And then I talked to Jon Walker, who covers Creighton basketball for the Omaha World-Herald. So we did a little men's basketball preview with him. Alabama playing Creighton. Of course, they decided to make me look silly by doing a Creighton preview. And then that night after we did it, they lost to UNLV, which would have been a nice talking point to have had for that interview had it had, or just Creighton had won and not made me look silly of doing that interview a little bit early. But it is what it is. Still a great interview we had with Jon. So plenty to dive into. But Tony, let's start things out with the good. We're going to talk the 2024 schedule too, but a lot of accolades for this Crimson Tide team and a lot of snubbery. Is that even a word? A lot of missed out accolades for some of these guys. We had the ESPN Awards show. So they had the Walter Camp All-Americans there. No first teamers for Alabama. Dallas Turner, Kool-Aid McKinstry, and J.C. Latham made the second team. And then Turner missing out on the Chuck Bednarik Award. And no Lou Groza for Will Reichard. They did not decide to give it as like a lifetime achievement for his breaking of the NCAA scoring record. Both those guys missed out on that. And then Jalen Milroe, not expected to be in the top three for the Heisman Trophy. But he ended up finishing sixth in voting for that. But still some recognition, but maybe not as much as we thought.
A lot of pissed off Tide fans over the last maybe 7 days, between the awards. I think the thing that got Alabama the most upset was the Reichard, because I think they, to go, 4 years without him, 5 years. Well, the first one he was injured a lot of, but so 4 full seasons where he's just been great and not getting any major award to show for it. I know he was SEC special teams player of the year, but like no major national award to go for it. That's kind of weird. But it's hard. I'll say this: it's hard to win that award as an Alabama kicker. You don't get that many 50-yard hard kicks. I mean, when
game
you have
winners,
an ending team, you're kicking a lot of extra points. I mean, if you look at the Will Reichard's record, I'd have to go back and check. Does he hold the Alabama field goal record? I'm not exactly sure if he does.
Probably. I would imagine.
I think a lot of what he's gotten his points on, and you still got to make them. But a lot of it is the success of the offense, and so like you're kicking a lot of extra points if you're the Alabama. You're the Alabama kicker. It's not just all hard field goals. Alabama has an offense that can move inside the red zone. So, those 2 misses actually probably ended up against LSU, where he had 2 misses in one game. That probably ended up costing him the Lou Groza. I don't think Will's that concerned about it. I think he's going to have a chance to kick in the NFL. And, I think, the Miami of Ohio kid is not going to be able to play in the playoffs. And I think that, Will Reichard would trade that any day. As far as the other, like, what did you say? Snubbery? Is that the word we're using?
Yeah, I guess. Word of the day.
I personally think Will Reichard's like the one of those that I would have definitely given that award to. Dallas Turner is great, but there's people that have had statistically better seasons than him for the Bednarik. So I thought that, I wasn't necessarily surprised that he didn't win that. Jalen Milroe coming in 6th. I would have maybe thought maybe he could have come in 5th ahead of Jordan Travis, but like, that's, I think the thing you take from Jalen Milroe's coming in 6th is the 5 people in front of him in the Heisman race, they're all going to be gone. So next year, does that make Jalen Milroe pole position for the Heisman? I wrote about that on the site. I really do think he's one of the guys that you would think that would be the Heisman favorite heading into next year. He's got everything you want. He's got the electric plays. He can throw deep. He's charismatic. He's got that smile. He's playing on a contender. He plays quarterback. He can take over games. I just think that, the nation's gonna fall in love with him next year if he continues this. And he's shown everything that he's continuously getting better. So I'm expecting him to be a serious contender. So yeah, I think we'll have more of these awards next year. But and who knows? Maybe Caleb Downs will win Freshman of the Year. That would be a nice award for Alabama, a nice feather in their hat. But it's not been the loudest award season for Alabama. But I think that they'll take their playoff ticket, and they wouldn't trade that for any of it.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree with your take too. That I think Milrose got to be the odds-on favorite, one of, if not the guy to start out next season. But we'll see where that goes. But yeah, couldn't have said it better. A bummer about Reichert for sure. Like I said, the other accolades though, they did have a lot of first team and second team All-Americans by the major outlets. Of course, Dallas Turner became a consensus All-American. He was named to 4 of the 5. He missed out on Walter Camp, but was Football Writers Association, AP, Sporting News, and the American Football Coaches Association. Latham appeared on a couple of those, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terrion Arnold, even Caleb Downs, who you said appeared on a couple of those All-America teams as well. First time since 2019, Alabama's not had a unanimous All-American, which is pretty remarkable if you look at the large context of college football. But
yeah, I did a draft, a mock draft roundup. We're filming this on a Thursday. I did it on a Thursday, and it's like there's not that elite Alabama player that would be the unanimous guy. Like, I don't even like who's going to be Alabama's first player taken in the draft. I think you could make an argument that it could be one of maybe even 4 players. You've got J.C. Latham, Dallas Turner, Kool-Aid McKinstry, and Terrion Arnold. Those are your 4 first rounders. Maybe Chris Braswell slips into the first round as well. It never really goes that way. It never really gets past 4. I know they had the great year after the 2020 season, but like it usually caps out around 4. And I think those are the 4 we're going to see. But you could sell me on each one of those guys being the first Alabama player taken. And they're all kind of going to go within that 6 to 20 range, I think. I don't think they're necessarily a top 5 guy in that group. I think if you had to tell me one of those guys would be a top 5 guy, I would go Dallas Turner, and I would say he probably just has a good playoff and then tears up the combine. And he's just such a physical freak that, teams are going to fall in love with him. But I don't think that there's like that elite, or not even elite player. There's not that guy on Alabama that you say like, oh, that is Alabama.
Yeah, there's not a Will Anderson. There's
or
not
Bryce
a
Young or
Bryce Young.
They don't have a 1,000-yard back. They don't have a 1,000-yard receiver. Their quarterback, was benched
Still
in
figuring
week
it.
3. So it's just like, I think next year you might have more of that, but this year, no.
And yet they're still in the playoffs, so they still have plenty of talent and still have all those first round guys. So
it's a very deep Alabama team.
Yes,
this year. You've got guys like Chris Braswell that might not be a first rounder, but like he's a great second edge rusher to have, and you've got like 2 of the best cornerbacks in the nation. You really have 2. It's nice to see Terrion Arnold on some of these lists because I think people just forgot about him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think, everyone just knew that Kool-Aid was going to be a first round pick since he stepped on campus, that like it shouldn't go unnoticed that Terrion Arnold is maybe even, is it Terrion Arnold Alabama's best cornerback this year? It's kind of hard to tell because teams are throwing at him more. So he's obviously getting more stats. Stats are deceiving at the cornerback position because you don't want to throw to the best guy. So it might mean that people think that Kool-Aid is better and they're trying to target Terrion, but that hasn't really worked for other teams. So, but it's nice to see him get some recognition because he's been really good.
Yeah. That gets tricky, right, with how they calculate that. But I agree, both of them have been great. And we'll see where that ends up in the draft. That'll be a fun thing to cover as the offseason kind of rolls around here. Speaking of the future, looking down the line for Alabama, we had the schedule releases on Wednesday night. So Alabama has all of its opponents, all of its dates for the 2024 schedule. I'll run through it real quick, Tony, and then you can give me your impressions. I know you wrote about it. August 31st, Western Kentucky, September 7th, South Florida. Both those games are at home. They do not have to go to South Florida again. September 14th at Wisconsin.
Your neck of the woods.
Fun game there. Yeah, up by me. I can speak on Camp Randall maybe later in a second. But September 21st, they're on bye. Then September 28th, Georgia, which we already know is at 6:30 on ABC. That'll be a huge game. October 5th at Vanderbilt. October 12th, South Carolina at home. October 19th, of course, third Saturday in October at Tennessee. October 26th, they play Missouri. November 2nd on a bye, off the bye. November 9th at LSU. November 16th at home against Mercer. November 23rd at Oklahoma. It'll be a fun one on the road, them new to the SEC. And then November 30th, of course, they end with the Iron Bowl at Auburn, or at home, against Auburn. Yeah, what's your take on that? What are you feeling about Bama's schedule? Some tough games on there.
First off, I don't think Alabama has done its homecoming game, but if you're smart, and you're trying to plan for homecoming, it's going to be South Carolina. It's the only one that makes sense, right? Because you're not going to wait until October 26th for Missouri to be homecoming. So I'm just going to go ahead and give y'all a spoiler. It's going to be South Carolina on October 12th. So I don't know if Alabama's
Good
announced
call.
that. If they have, and I'm just giving you old news, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to use the big brain and use a little context clues, and that will be your homecoming game this year. Look, there's two ways to look at this Alabama schedule. One, you could look at it as they're going to have Wisconsin, Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, LSU, Oklahoma, Auburn. That's a tough slate of games. But I do think that after these games kind of filled out, that Alabama has a little bit of, I guess maybe the teams don't get any easier, but where they fall on the schedule seems very fortuitous for Alabama. You've got kind of that first stretch of games. You travel to Wisconsin, but then you have an open week before you play Georgia. That will be important. You basically have an open week after Georgia with a trip to Vanderbilt. Then, I think then you obviously have your open week ahead of LSU and a recovery week against Mercer, which also kind of helps you prepare for that game at Oklahoma. So you don't really have those two hard games in a row. The thing that I would circle is the October 19th and October 26th, going to Tennessee and then having, how is Missouri going to be on, October 26th? We always look for trap games when these schedules come out. And I think you'd have to circle Missouri at home as that trap game. You're going to be, there's 2 bye weeks here. So you're not going to be necessarily as tired as you would on a normal schedule where you'd be playing all these games before heading into an open week. But you are going to be playing, 1, 2, 3, 4. That'll be your 5th game in a row. You'll have had a game against Georgia and a game against Tennessee. Who knows? South Carolina might be a little bit better. So I think that Missouri game could be my trap game. And then the other thing that stands out is normally Alabama has a cupcake right before Auburn, and now you have a trip to Norman, and that is couldn't be a polar opposite. And also if you're gonna face that Oklahoma team, it's better to face them early in the year. They were losing their whole entire offensive line. And so if you were to play, if I was from Alabama, I would probably want, maybe to trade that game with, your trip to, Vanderbilt or your trip to Wisconsin or something like that, just because I think that you want to play that Oklahoma game a lot earlier in the season where you can take advantage of them not having an offensive line. I think, by that time in the season, by that time in the season, you might have a more gelled offensive line. Oklahoma's going to be tough no matter what. And it'll be nice to see Alabama play there. I think it's the first time since the 20s or something. It's only the second ever time I think Alabama's gone to Oklahoma. So I'm excited about that one. I got my best friends up in Oklahoma City. So it's always nice if, rare to get out there on a work trip. And so I can maybe turn that into a little bit of vacation as well. But it is weird to have that one right before the Iron Bowl when you're used to having, your Mercer or your, who was it this year? I literally,
it was Chattanooga.
Yeah, the Mighty Mocs,
the Citadel.
Yeah, something like that, that's a big difference, does that make the Iron Bowl different? Alabama hasn't lost a home Iron Bowl since that comeback game in 2010, but who knows? I mean, what if somebody gets injured in a tough trip to Oklahoma? That's an interesting little spot of the schedule. But I guess to go back to my earlier point, I do think the schedule falls pretty nicely for Alabama considering the teams that they have on the schedule. You don't have to do anything crazy like play, Georgia and Oklahoma in back-to-back weeks or Georgia and Tennessee in back-to-back weeks. It's doable. I'd be shocked if Alabama comes away undefeated out of this slate. But I mean, also another thing we got to consider is they don't have to anymore. Everyone makes the playoffs. The 12 team, Alabama is going to have to be terrible to not make the playoffs. So I think that, this will just be kind of a fun season, a lot of fun matchups, a couple trips that, if you're traveling with the Tide, you get, just look at the trips you get to take. Wisconsin, that's a unique one. Vanderbilt is Nashville. That's a cool city.
Yeah. fun.
I always like going to Neyland Stadium. I know that might not be everybody else's, but you also got that. You've got LSU. It's to me one of the best venues in the nation, and then that unique trip to Oklahoma. So it's going to be a fun schedule, if nothing else.
Yeah, yeah, I like your takes there too with the the way their buys fall. I think they get a lot of benefit there. Couple of things I know I'm able to speak to. You mentioned that October 26th game. There's a chance that could be a pretty high stakes one just in the SEC in general. The way Missouri's schedule fell, there's a chance they might be 7-0 heading into that game against Alabama. And that could be a really fun, whether it's SEC or even college game day coming to Tuscaloosa, if that's an undefeated clash there. They still managed to get that. What say
Mizzou's
again?
doing some stuff in the portal. I mean, like Mizzou's
Yeah.
building up into a decent
They're
team.
trying to build off of that 10-2 season for
Yeah, they
sure.
got a 5-star commit. I mean, like Mizzou is not, just a pushover team anymore, and I think they're going to be able to build, and who knows, maybe they'll win this is it the Cotton Bowl that they're in against Ohio State? So,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, maybe they use that, get some more momentum in the portal, and really that could definitely, like you said, sorry to interrupt you, but that could be a big trap game.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, especially if both those teams are undefeated, it definitely helps that it's in Tuscaloosa, and I think Alabama. It's hard. I can't make a prediction. Who knows? Like it's too far away. But yeah, I mean, this is just a fun schedule. I mean, I'll be transparent. It's cool for me as someone who might cover this team. So like Tony said, I grew up in Wisconsin. I'm a Missouri grad, so to see both of those games as potential games or teams I'd get to cover. Alabama facing off, especially in Camp Randall. Travel to that game if you're an Alabama fan. It's a great atmosphere. It's a fun time. It's in September. It'll still be warm. It won't be freezing cold outside. So that's a nice thing. But yeah, the Oklahoma game too will be really special. I mean, those two teams doing that. I know they've played Texas a couple times recently, but to have those two teams in the fold now and to add that to the schedule, it makes things harder when you're looking at, oh my gosh, you have to play Georgia, Oklahoma, LSU, Tennessee. Like it adds a team, but I think it's a fun atmosphere, like you said, especially on the road. You get to go to those games.
I'll have to ask my best friend, but is November 23rd at Oklahoma? Is that going to be really cold? I mean, I don't know
It
how
could be,
cold
yeah.
does
That could
Oklahoma
be
get?
cold.
Like, the Midwest can get kind of dreary sometimes, and like I don't know. I think that
Recently, it's 50 degrees in Wisconsin today on December 14th, which is a little
so.
bit scary. So
Yeah,
you might get lucky. You might
we're
get
all going to be
lucky.
living in a puddle in like 7 years, but
Yeah. Yep.
so maybe they won't be that. Maybe it won't be that cold.
Maybe it won't be that bad. And it's interesting they still get Mercer here on November 16th, so they still kind of get that cupcake game.
Yeah,
Even though you're right, it's not right
biggest game
before
of the
the Iron
season.
Bowl.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry, you're right. No disrespect to the Bears. They beat Duke once in basketball. Um, Fact. But yeah, I think there's some really fun games on here. I think you're getting the benefit of Georgia early too. I think that might be kind of nice. I don't know. Maybe you'd rather play Georgia kind of similar to this year where Alabama has it more figured out, or would you rather play them early in the year when maybe Georgia's still figuring things out? I'm not
They're
sure.
gonna
But
return. They're gonna return Carson Beck more likely than not.
yeah.
I think that would depend, right? Like, so if they
Mhm.
don't return Carson Beck, then like, yeah, you definitely want him early in the season. But
Yeah.
I think I've looked at Georgia's schedule. They also have an open week heading into this one, so um, that's just going to be a matchup that we're going to be talking about for 2 weeks because both of those teams are going to be kind of like focusing on it. Sometimes when one team has a bye week and the other team doesn't, then it's not as loud, but like with both teams only focusing on that game for 2 weeks, that's going to be one of those games we talk about like throughout the summer. And also just like, that's going to be the most hyped game.
Definitely. It's fun.
It's
It's
just
fun
it's
to look
hard though,
forward
because
to
like,
these
will it matter? Like, will it ultimately, like, I hate to be a cynic here, but like, will it matter? Like,
with the playoff.
with the playoff, like I don't love the 12-team playoff, but these are just
Yeah,
fun matchups. I'm gonna be positive, and these are fun matchups that we can enjoy, even if they might not be as significant to the postseason as a normal year. Because I think Alabama could
yeah.
get by with losing 2 games this year, next
Mhm.
year, sorry, and still making the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You and I differ on that with the 12 team. I know, like, I still think these games are going to be awesome and have like people are going to care and stuff. And then, yeah, you'll still have the 12 team playoff that will be equally as exciting. And I mean, it could be a situation where they're playing for seeding if they do lose 10 games, or sorry, if they do lose 2 games. They could be playing for seeding for a home playoff game or a weird trip to Michigan in December, which you don't want.
I could
But
see that's going to be the most unique thing about the playoff, and more so just not only is this the one thing we didn't talk about is this is the first year since what 1991 2 that there's no divisions in the SEC, so it's just going to be the top 2 teams. But yeah, with the conference expansion, maybe not so much in the SEC because I think the SEC has done a good job of keeping teams regionally close. But one of the things starting next year, you're going to see some of these teams that play in warm climates have to play in a cold climate game, whether it be in the playoff or whether it be, eventually like USC going to Penn State for, a cold game or whatever.
November
You're going
game,
to
yeah.
see those. And I think that's going to be fun, if nothing else, just to see how the Southern teams will do. I personally think that that's one of the things that the Northern teams have held on to this whole time. It's like, oh, well, you don't want to play us in the North. I'm going to go ahead and say that I think more often than not, talent will win out, and like the Southern teams will be cold, but we'll win anyways.
Agreed. Yeah.
So
agreed. Yeah, we'll see. It's interesting. It's interesting to break down with so many changes, and I'm excited to see how it all unfolds. But yeah, some fun games coming up for Bama. Tony, before we kick it to Brandon, you want to give us a rundown of some transfer portal stuff? Because Bama's been busy. We were talking right before we hopped on, looking for maybe some guys on the edge to bring in. Who should fans keep in their brain name wise for Alabama
yeah.
targets?
So I mean, like the big thing that we've been seeing in the transfer portal in terms of Alabama targets now, it's this is not the only thing they're going to be targeting. But for the sake of this discussion, with this, with us talking on Thursday and the weekend coming up, edge rusher has been the popular position for Alabama. Look, they're going to lose Dallas Turner. They're going to lose Chris Braswell. And together, that's 17 sacks, 24 tackles for a loss, and 18 quarterback hurries. So that's a lot of production to replace. Now, I know, Quindarius Robinson, he was a senior day guy, probably comes back. That could be one of those starting spots. He's your best, I guess, reserve guy right now at the position. And you also return 2 5-star kids that didn't play this year, and Keon Keeley and Yanzi Pierre, 2 freshmen that I think will make a lot bigger impact next year. But there still needs to be those reinforcements. And the names that, are kind of standing out at the moment are Trey Moore, an edge rusher from UTSA. You think, oh, UTSA, is he going to be able to make the switch to the SEC? But this guy, he ranks 3rd in the nation with 14 sacks. He's got 17.5 tackles for a loss. He's the AAC Defensive Player of the Year. Probably needs to add a little bit more weight to play edge rusher at Alabama. He's 6'3", 235 pounds. Put about 15 pounds on him, maybe even 10 pounds on him. I think, he could be good. And then, if you want more, he'll be visiting Alabama this weekend. Another person visiting Alabama is Fidel Diggs from Texas A&M. Obviously, a guy that Alabama fans are very aware of. He has 4 sacks, 2 apiece in his last 2 games against Alabama. He had 2 this year, 2 last year. He had 2 forced fumbles, during last year's game in Tuscaloosa. He's been an Alabama killer. This year, he has 11 tackles for a loss and 4 sacks. He's kind of that established SEC edge rusher that Alabama can just plug in. He'll be visiting Friday, and then he's going up to Syracuse on Saturday. And then Tyler Barron is a name Alabama fans will also be familiar with. He's Tennessee's edge rusher. He had 6 sacks, 10.5 tackles for a loss this year. Alabama is visiting him on Friday. He's not coming to Tuscaloosa this weekend, but he did make a visit to Ole Miss today. We're recording on Thursday. Another schools that are in that are Georgia, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas are kind of like the favorites for Tyler Barron. So, I think that any one of those 3 guys, I think, would go a long way to filling one of the 2 openings that Alabama has at the edge rusher position. Shoot, I mean, they'd probably take multiple of these guys. I mean, if you could just reload the 5-star, Keon Keeley and Yanzi Pierre might not like to hear that, but if you get 2 of these guys and just reload at edge rusher, it'd be hard to say no to that. I really like, you look at the potential with Trey Moore. He's only a redshirt sophomore, and in the past 2 seasons, now I know it's at a different level, but he has 34.5 tackles for a loss over the last 2 seasons, and you just start thinking like, man, if he can put that production over, carry it over to a an SEC level, you have like a Will Anderson type. That's Will Anderson type production, and it's kind of crazy. Now I don't expect him to do that in the SEC, but the fact that he's done it the last 2 years, it's not just like a fluke. He's kind of I don't know, like an interesting name for me. Of that list, I think he's probably the most exciting, just because I think you start imagining when you look at those numbers. Fadil Diggs, I think maybe at the moment one of the more realistic names, and somebody that Alabama knows really well, that could come in and more of a proven guy, right? That he can do it. So I think those are the two I would list right now for, watch the most. But it's not just those 3 guys, right? I mean, there's other guys in the portal, and they're really going to have to address the secondary as well. But for this weekend, I think the name of the game is edge rusher, and that's definitely a spot Alabama is going to be targeting.
There you go. So yeah, maybe it's like, if you can beat him, join him with Diggs. Like,
yeah,
you bring
like,
him in.
It's just like, it's more like if Alabama, if you can't contain him, just like invite him. Like,
yeah,
bring
him in.
They weren't going to play Texas A&M anyways this year, but I feel like, don't run the risk of him like going to another SEC school and then you having to play him and having another 2 sacks and force fumbles again. Like, that guy just absolutely eats Alabama's lunch every time they play him. So it's like they definitely know what they have in him. So
definitely. Any other guys just on off the top of your head that you think
that, like I said, there's other people. Overton from A&M is a name to watch. I mean, everybody in the world wants Walter Nolan. Those are 2 more defensive end guys, and you got to look that Alabama's losing Justin Aboigbe and probably Tim Smith. So you're going to want to replace that production as well. Like I said, I don't really have a lot of names in the secondary, but I would assume Alabama targets. They're not going to go. Really, I mean, if Malachi Moore leaves for the NFL draft, you might only have Caleb Downs from this year's starting secondary. So you can't just replace that with just young faces. You're going to have to come in and have, I know Trey Amos comes back, so you'd have him and Downs, but I think you're going to need to add another established guy, whether it be a safety or a star or a cornerback. Just like, you can't just have that many inexperienced people in the secondary. It's just going to be, you'll be eaten alive. So I expect them to target, somebody out of the secondary. I think, you can kind of wait to see who's in there. Obviously, Alabama's focus is going to be on Michigan and preparing for the playoff. But I think, it's definitely something to watch.
Yeah, a lot of things to keep an eye on. Saban's been doing a lot of in-home visits. We'll talk about some of those. We'll have Brandon hop on here in just a sec and join us. But Tony, any final things from you before we segue it?
I think we're good.
Any last words? Okay.
We'll my best.
Yeah, you did great. But yeah, we'll segue. We're going to talk to Brandon about some recruiting, and then finish up with some Alabama basketball, preview the Creighton game. Okay, we're here with Brandon. Hard man to track down with he's been busy. It's been, it's gearing up towards signing day. Brandon, just first and foremost, tell us what you've been up to, who you've been watching. You've obviously been at games. You've been busy here in the last couple of days, breaking some big news for Alabama in the recruiting world. And then obviously things heating up ahead of signing day.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like something that people know me for is travel. And my friend actually the other day, I was in Texas, he said, "You move in silence." And I was like, well, how do you even know where I'm at? But, like this week I'm at Texas State Championships. As we've kind of seen in this 2024 class and even in the past, with Jalen Milroe, Jace McClellan, Jalen Hale, list goes on, Texas is going to continue to be an area of focus for Alabama. And with Texas having kind of the last round of state championship games, it just made the most sense. It's 4 days of games. And so myself personally, I wanted to be out here. Today there's a Bama target playing for Belleville. There's some talent tonight as well, some kids that they were involved with. And tomorrow is like the whole shebang as far as talent's concerned. So we've seen Alabama extend a couple 2026, 2027 offers. So we're starting to kind of see that offer cycle kind of kick back up for the young guys. But across the board, I just want to be ahead, for young, old, new, etc. And this provides a good opportunity for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's ever changing. Who are a couple guys? You mentioned even some down the line all the way in 2026. It's hard to think that far ahead for me, but obviously, you're totally on it. But who are some guys in those kind of upcoming classes you're looking at, even with these next couple classes upcoming, whether it's guys who could flip in 2024 or even 2025 guys?
So one guy in particular, and it's crazy. I took a picture the other day, but his name is like literally eluding me right now. But he plays for Belleville. I'm going to pull it up actually. Excuse me. Yeah, we're doing it old school today. But it's geez, I'm about to pull it up right now. DJ Sanders out of Belleville. So I actually saw him yesterday, like just kind of passing by, not on the field, and it was easy to say, "What's going on, DJ?" Like I knew exactly who it was just because you know what you know. But he said he definitely wants to get on campus. I think he has the opportunity to be easily he's a top 100 player, top 250 player, has that kind of upside and the potential. But I definitely want to see that in person tomorrow for Duncanville. I mean, they had a whole slew of guys. I mean, Alabama was in the mix for Colin Simmons and geez, I'm having some brain farts this morning. But they're involved with like multiple players, Caden Durham, some of the 2025 guys, and those are just programs. Duncanville, North Shore with Devin Sanchez, 2025 corner, top 5 prospect in the country, is down in Texas, Ohio State, and Alabama. He'll be playing tomorrow against Duncanville. DeSoto plays tomorrow. They had DeAndre Ridden, who held the Bama offer, and is still at least showing some interest in them. And then in the morning, there's some big time games as well with South Oak Cliff and several other schools. So again, just it's been a great opportunity to get ahead. And with some of this recruiting stuff, it's very interesting because you go to the game one day and they don't have an offer, and then you go the next day and it's like, well, I'm glad I got content on that guy, because he now has the offer, and just trying to get ahead and have a good feeling on some potential prospects before they actually are.
Definitely. Yeah, of course. Let's get to I think the biggest news in the last week, which of course, you have been speculating the last couple of weeks on the pod has been, it's been trending toward this, but Ryan Williams reclassifying to 2024. So he'll be able to join the Crimson Tide ahead of next season. How big is that? And obviously I don't think you're very shocked by that news, seeming what, from what you have been telling us, it had kind of been trending that way.
Yeah, crazy enough. I actually put that on the board in the summer. I've been kind of tipped off that a reclassification was potentially possible before the season. But one thing about Ryan Williams is he knows how to work the process. He knows how to market himself, for like better terms. And so, he obviously held that information, waited until the end of the year to actually make it official. But, it'd be crazy for us to think that Maryland didn't know, Alabama didn't know, and, potentially a couple of other shooters didn't know as well. But, definitely big information. He finally went official with it last week. I think, off the back, it definitely adds a lot of value to the 2024 class. Brian will be a 5-star still just because of, his status and, just what he's been able to do in the state of Alabama and really just, from a national perspective. But, with a guy like that, now is going to bring him up in our recruiting updates, and kind of like the recruiting rundown, so to speak, for National Sign Day. But I mean, we'll just kind of speak on it right now that, he's planning to wait till February, which is definitely intriguing. So, we shouldn't expect to see, his signature come in. But, at the same time, Ryan definitely, he brings a lot to the table. And, to have him in this class with the likes of, Amari Jefferson, who just got the All-American Bowl invite in San Antonio. You pair him with Rico Scott, and then Caleb Odom, an athletic tight end, and then there's a couple more names that have been floating around that we can get into, but just Ryan being in this class definitely adds some flash, some sizzle, in a group that in some regards have been lacking a little bit of that with only 2 receivers in the fold.
Yeah, I mean, go for it if you want to get into any of those other names, and even I know, we're on flip watch, obviously here in the couple days leading up to National Signing Day. I know Tristan Jernigan, who's an A&M commit, visited recently. Who are some of those guys, if you want to, maybe revisit some of the guys who are already coming to Bama in 2024, and maybe some of those guys that should be on a flip watch, maybe committed elsewhere, but Bama could still be in the mix here.
No, absolutely. We start with the other big fish, one that's been speculative, and there's been some backlash on it, but I knew that he was going to flip to Auburn the first time around, so I probably have a pretty decent source here. But Perry Thompson, things are making their way seemingly full circle. Put some stuff on the board about it. In some regards, Auburn, Alabama fans, this is a topic of high contention. And so, to see Perry also entertaining himself, he received a visit from Coach Saban. I think 2 days ago, 2 days ago, he received a visit from Coach Saban. He had put out a graphic that had Auburn and Alabama and their top. Auburn and Alabama on the graphic, saying, hey, my sign day is the 20th. And, just from some things I heard behind the scenes, it was always going to be NIL being a factor, and, NIL kind of at first not seeming to be an option at Alabama because he had committed so early, more off just the love for the program. But, from what I've been told and in my conversation with Perry, he's always had love for Alabama. It was just a matter of, how he fit into the fold. And, whenever you see some of the numbers and hear some of the numbers that Cam Coleman got, kind of when I first put it back on the board, it was like, does Perry Thompson want to be the odd man out, especially when you have the lineage of Julio Jones coming through their program? And, for Auburn, there's going to be some questions about, the receivers they are able to produce until they're able to produce the type of receivers that Alabama's been able to produce over the years. So I'll just start with Perry Thompson. Definitely, one to watch. He's made it one to watch himself. So, if there's anybody speculating it, just go get on the kids' Twitter and Instagram, to see what that looks like. But for me, it looks like he's definitely making things interesting. You mentioned Tristan Jernigan. Talked to a couple people around him the other day, and even him himself. But with the kids, sometimes you have to take it with a grain of salt because
Sure.
They may give you what you want or they may not. But I think Jernigan definitely had a good visit. He likes the concept of being able to kind of fit into the mold and play for that Bama brand. But as we should have all noticed, he's still committed to Texas A&M, despite their lack of, having a defensive coordinator for a moment, and even, kind of the transition of coaches from the Jimbo Fisher to the Mike Elko. But, just kind of knowing what you know about Elko. Elko's a program builder in some regards. We saw what he did at Duke. But he was actually pretty instrumental into, kind of the players A&M was able to get in the 2022 class. So, my opinion on it is what it is, but, Jernigan's definitely someone to watch. But until he flips, he's an A&M commit. And, with A&M getting the visit this weekend, I think that's major for their program. And, when you just kind of factor in who Alabama already has in the fold as far as kind of linebacker types, it's a matter of, does Jernigan want to come in and wait for the process, or does he want to potentially go to A&M and play next season, or maybe even get some playing time this year? So, that's another player to keep an eye on. Another player, just speaking of official visits, Kevin Riley. It's a name I've mentioned a few times now, and we'll talk about two different running backs, really three. Daniel Hill has his signing day, essentially not even signing day, but he has his commitment at the All-American game. And, even with Mississippi State getting him on campus and Tennessee talking to him with the top three and South Carolina seeming like they were in the lead, Alabama's still involved. And, with people around him very high on the Crimson Tide and people who've come to the Meridian program and the history Alabama has of producing backs comparative to Mississippi State, comparative to South Carolina, comparative to, heck, even a Tennessee. You look at the numbers and the numbers add up. You can be a third-string running back at Alabama and you can start in the NFL, day one. So you factor that in. But then the two players who are currently committed elsewhere, official visit this weekend with Kevin Riley, running back out of Northport, right down the street from Tuscaloosa, someone who has really been focused on just kind of getting all his checks, his eggs in a basket, so to speak. He's been committed to Miami for some time now, I believe since the summer. But Alabama started to really pick things up for him the last 3 months. Heck, he was even at the LSU game in as quiet as a fashion as he could faction. But you look at the class and you start to think to yourself, there's potential for 2 running backs. And I believe the Alabama wants to take 2 running backs. And another name just to keep an eye on is Jaden Baugh out of Georgia. I believe he's a 4-star, but committed to Arkansas at the moment. I want to say we have him listed as an athlete, but Jaden Baugh, thick, heavy built kid, actually started his career kind of as some receiver, and then kind of just made the full-fledged move to running back just because of his size and his girth. But he does everything for his team. But right now, Florida and Alabama seem to be pushing for him the hardest. I talked to a source this morning who's very close to him, and said, that's something that you have to keep an eye on, just based on how Alabama's ability to close and his athleticism to be able to kind of play multiple positions with a primary focus on running back. Sometimes you get a guy who's just a pure athlete that's hard to overlook. So, just when you look at kind of the flip watch scenarios, Jaden Baugh is a name that comes to mind, a Tristan Jernigan, a Kevin Riley, a Perry Thompson. And then, on the negative side, you see a Ryan Williams, still kind of entertaining Auburn. And then, the other one that's kind of a wild card, and I believe he'll, end up staying firm to his commitment and actually get on campus for bowl practice, but is Jameer Grimsley. And that's one guy, legit 6'3", say legit, 183, can easily put on some weight, especially when he gets in the program. Like a guy that Alabama's seemingly been high on for some time. He's been committed for a while. He kind of got, partial and part that DB class rolling. But Florida has, really put the pressure on him. They really want, guys to stay in state. And despite, the program being in the position that it's in, to add a guy like Grimsley, he's from Tampa, like, do you want to stay in state, or do you want to come to Alabama within a recruiting class that has currently 6 DBs in the class? So, I think Grimsley's definitely one to watch, probably even a little bit more so than Ryan Williams, just because of the timing where Ryan Williams, is set to, sign in February versus Grimsley, who's set to sign next week. So, from a flip perspective, those are several things that we could be looking at, along with, maybe some moving on the offensive line.
Yeah. I mean, we're gonna touch base with you again, like, even as early next week, because of just how much this stuff all changes. But that's a good update. So some movement to watch at running back, and maybe some potential negatives to hit this class if things don't go Alabama's way and they don't close. Like you said, lock down some of these guys' commitments. Any other things just from either a flip season standpoint, or even if you want to touch on, of course, the 2025 guy Alabama just got, Javion Hilson, the 4-star. Any other things there? Even any other fun updates from being down in Texas at these state championships?
Well, I mean, I'll just stick to 2024. I mean, there's still some more nuggets. National Signing Day, obviously. Steve Mabau. I want to say he's from Canada, but I think it says Quebec. But defensive end, he actually he another reclassification. So almost like Alabama knew a couple of things. Reclassified, I want to say in the summer, and kind of turned his focus to making sure that he could be an early enrollee. Has, I want to say, 15, 20 plus offers. Huge, big kid, 6'4", 260. So you'll definitely see him put his hand in the dirt, and has the room to continue to grow. But that's one that I keep an eye on. Ja'Shawn Ross out of Missouri, I would definitely keep an eye on him going into sign day next week. I think right now, we have him future cast to Bama. So definitely one to keep an eye on. Favorite Edwin. Whenever we saw Jordan Seaton decide to go to Colorado, Edwin was always kind of a guy who was high on Alabama, built good relationships with, Casey Poe, Mason Short in 2025 class, Will Sanders and company. And, it seems like things are trending in that direction for Favor as well. A guy who, definitely is a project, but, whenever you have a Caden Proctor on one end, you can take a couple projects, right? You can allow guys to develop behind guys who may quote unquote be a little bit more established. And even a name just that I'm keeping an eye on is Solomon Williams. He received an in-home visit from Coach Saban the other day, and he's definitely been very vocal about his interest in Alabama. He visited as well for the LSU game, but I think it's just a matter of who Alabama wants to take clearly on that defensive front. And right now, it seems like Steve and Jay-Sean Ross would kind of be some of the highest contenders.
Yeah, gotcha. That was the last thing I wanted to ask is, I've just been seeing on Twitter all these in-home visits for Saban. Seems like he's been getting busy there. Is that's mostly his strategy kind of at this point with the days leading up to signing day, and then how he balances that with then turning his attention to Michigan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with a lot of these guys, you have to make sure they're whole, they're solid. But one thing about this 2024 class, I mean, a lot of these guys have been solid. I mean, I'm looking at this right now. I mean, let me see for a second. Saying never wavered ever.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just go through it. I mean, because Saying never wavered. Mbakwe has been solid. Xavier Brown committed and it never budged. Caleb Odom had some intrigue from Ole Miss. It seemed like they had dropped 2 guys to get him. But, even when I watched the SEC championship and kind of saw his presence on social media, I was pretty confident that he would stay. But, I'd heard that Ole Miss was pushing. Amari Jefferson has been committed, since he's been committed, and spurned his in-state Vols, while he was still committed to them from a baseball perspective to go to Alabama. Jeremiah Beeman saw some buzz, but, he's an in-state guy and has a lot of Alabama connections. Peyton Woodyard has stayed solid. I mean, this class as a whole, Joseph Anada, Radarius Morgan, Caden Jones hasn't budged, Drake Kirkpatrick, Jay Lindsey, Quentin Reese. So a lot of these guys, they're done, as far as having, even considering a flip. And so I think signing day will be intriguing because, we'll have other guys enter the fold, right? But as far as this class itself and how it's been constructed so far, Isaiah Faga, these guys are pretty firm, to playing for Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide. And, I think, when we look back on this class, one that, in some respects, it could be deemed in quotation marks, could be seen as needing a little bit more development than maybe some of the classes of past.
Sure.
We could see a lot of these guys develop in 2-3 years into highly beneficial, highly motivated players for Alabama. Because, these guys are going to come in with expectation to come and just develop. They're not going to have that expectation to come in and play right away. And I think, one thing that the staff really focused on is guys who want to be in Tuscaloosa, guys who want to be in T-Town, and guys who are willing to buy into the process of development. Because the last thing Coach Saban wants is, you get a bunch of big-name guys, and they have 5 stars and 4 stars, which is what we want as Bama. We want at Bama, like Alabama wants that. That said, you don't want them transferring out either. And I think the majority of these guys in this class are going to be looking to stay for the long haul.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, we'll see if any of those other guys that you mentioned, maybe join that class that of some of these solid guys that are in for the long haul. And obviously, we'll have a ton of coverage on the site. Brandon's on it. Obviously down in Texas this weekend. He'll be on it for next week for all these guys, all these names to keep an eye on. Brandon, appreciate it. Good luck with the rest of the Texas State football coverage. We obviously the fans appreciate it. And yeah, you do move in silence. You're around, you're ever busy, but now you're ahead of the curve on some of the guys, even in when you said, looking at some of these 2027 guys, it's just, that feels so far in the future, but that's obviously how these teams think. So, way to be on it. And yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Thompson and you go, man, is that a baby Alabama? I mean, Anquan Fagans, you talked to him the other day. I have a piece on him coming up. But, he's still having some conversations with them. You have a Jared Smith, who transferred over there as well. Him and Fagans have a good relationship. And Jared at least expressed interest in Alabama, a strong interest in Alabama. And then, you look at even the other guys like Trent Seaborn. Has interest in Bama. They just offered a kid who I just posted about this morning. He has an offer from Bama, and then even Cameron Pritchard, the defensive end. I mean, so on Thompson's roster right now, there's 5 guys that Bama offers. So,
that's wild.
At the end of the day, the Bama process is ever ongoing, but excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well. With that, we'll segue. We're going to finish the show. I talked to Jon Walker to preview the Creighton game for men's basketball, so we'll close things out there. Okay, we are talking to Jon Walker. He is the Creighton beat writer for the Omaha World-Herald. Just going to ask him, about this big game upcoming. Number 8 Creighton facing off against Bama in Omaha. I will be going, already looking forward to finally being at a game as opposed to covering Alabama's previous games remotely. But John, first and foremost, just looking at the Blue Jays. So Alabama, they had a tough game last time out against Purdue, and now Creighton's the second of this kind of 3-game slog that they've got here, playing the Blue Jays and then going to Arizona. What have you just made of the Blue Jays season so far? Kind of your impressions. Obviously 8 in the country, 8-1 so far.
Yeah.
Hitting some of their preseason expectations. What's your just general thoughts on them?
Yeah, I think again, I'm kind of fresh on the beat. I've been here for like 3 weeks now, less than 3 weeks. And so, I'm still trying to find out a lot about this team too, but I think that's kind of where I can give just the initial take that most people would probably be looking for. And it's that this Creighton team is going to force you into mid ranges on defense, and they have a 7'1" center who will rim protect. So they'll run you off the 3-point line and kind of rely on you taking and being forced into a mid range. Offensively, pull up Bart Torvik, Ken Palm, Evan Maya, whatever metric you want. They're like a top 10 defense, no matter in every category. It's ridiculous. They're going to let it fly. Bama did quite a bit of that against Purdue. Same situation. They were forced in. Like you're not gonna drive against Zach Edey, right? And so no, similar to what we saw a little bit from the Tide against Purdue, you see a similar offensive approach from Creighton, but at least thus far, it's been because Creighton makes it that way. That's how the Jays want to play, not maybe because they've been forced into it sometimes.
Yeah. You kind of hit on the two things that I think give Alabama the most problems, which is a very tall center, as you saw with Zach Edey. Granted, he gives most teams problems.
Right.
That as well as forcing mid ranges. How have you seen teams maybe give Creighton some problems in those areas? And is it about maybe speeding the Blue Jays up? When Alabama has the ball, what can Alabama do to kind of establish its tempo, and its offensive efficiency, which is one of the best in the country?
Yeah, I think you can look at that Colorado State game. That's Creighton's. There's my cat. If anybody saw him run by, but anybody who watched the Creighton's lone loss of the year to Colorado State, which we've now since found out is going to be pretty good this year. But we didn't at the time. That was kind of their statement win. And they did it by forcing the Jays into a lot of misses. They were like, I think 6 of 29 from 3 that night in Kansas City. And they lost by 20, And Colorado State had kind of a similar enforcer on the inside, maybe not 7-1, but they had a similar enforcer on the inside to limit Ryan Kalkbrenner, if you will, because it's so hard to stop him. He can space the floor and then back you down. And he's 7-1, right? That's how you can do it. If you can test a lot of shots on the perimeter and have an enforcer that you can equal Ryan Kalkbrenner. And Bama showed that they weren't scared to kind of run through the trees when they were playing Purdue. So, I wouldn't expect them to come to Omaha and be scared of the challenge.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned that Colorado State game. How have you seen this Creighton team kind of bounce back from that loss to then, climb back up the rankings? Obviously, Colorado State, like you said, has proven to be no slouch themselves. But how have you seen Creighton kind of bounce back from that?
I think it might have been good for this team. That sounds so weird to say, right? Like, what, a 20-point loss before the turn of before December? What? I think it made them realize that something has to work. They had Nemhard leave, they had Kaluma leave through the offseason, had Baylor, Trey, and Ryan Kalkbrenner coming back, get Stephen Ashworth from Utah State. They're now true point guard in like May. So like a really, really late transfer in my eyes. And then we recently saw that, that Colorado State game made them all mesh together. We saw their lineup kind of like round out, if you will, in their big win over Central Michigan. Now, again, it is Central Michigan. It's not Bama. It's not UConn. It's not Marquette. I get that. But Isaac Trott and Mason Miller, kind of two guys who have been competing for the 4 spot. They've kind of found their niche in the offense. They've got a little bit of a ways to go on defense, but in the offense, they've really kind of found their niche. Miller started. Isaac came off the bench against Central Michigan. They combined for 35 points on 14 shots. So, if they can do that, and you get the usual production from the other guys, they're going to be a tough out. And that's kind of what they've shown since that Colorado State loss and figuring everything out.
Yeah, definitely. I'm switching to the Bama perspective for a second in terms of, I'm curious how Creighton is going to hone in on Mark Sears. He's had an awesome start to the year. Obviously one of their very few returners from last season. How do you expect Creighton to kind of guard him and try and take him out of the game?
Yeah, I think it would have to be maybe a mix. You'll see 3 guys primarily guard him, I think. It'll probably either be Trey Alexander, Baylor Shireman. And if the primary matchup they want is Trey, then you'll probably see quite a bit of Francisco Farabello as well, just to kind of keep fresh legs. He's a really good defensive guard. Kind of their Swiss Army knife, whatever they need a little bit of, they'll put him in and have him do. So, yeah, probably a mix of that, and then again trying to force mid ranges with a 7'1" center around the rim. That's going to be this team's defensive philosophy. I think no matter who they're playing, but I think they're gonna. It'll be interesting because we saw Purdue have a little bit of success in the first half, anyways, letting Alabama shoot it. The Tide have proved that to be costly at other times. And this Creighton team is all about running opponents off the 3-point line or forcing them into really bad ones. So I don't know what the philosophy will be. I think we'll learn pretty quick, probably by the first media timeout.
Yeah.
But that's obviously subject to change. So.
Yeah, definitely. You're going back to some of those guys in Creighton, obviously they're so talented. They've brought, even with losing the 2 guys that you said, they've still brought a lot of talent back. You mentioned the Ashworth transfer. Who is the one guy, when you look at Alabama that you think from Creighton can give them, the most problems on Saturday?
Yeah, I'm actually working on my story for that day. And I had just written notes out on it. I should have just had those pulled up, right? Because that would make sense. I think the really interesting thing is I don't know if he'll necessarily be the one to give them problems, but it'll be a really fun matchup to watch is Grant Nelson and Baylor Shireman. Shireman came from South Dakota State. Grant, as I'm sure everyone watching is aware, came from North Dakota State. So they played twice a year for like the first 2 or 3 years of their college career. And so I just find that super interesting. And then Grant, it seems like Grant's still trying to find his role in the lineup, which even he's put up really good numbers this year. I think it's like 14-6 or something like that. But he, is still trying to find his way. Their best forward, I think you could say easily. So yeah, that'll be a really fun matchup. He could give them problems, especially if they can get into some mismatches with switching Nelson onto like a Trout or Miller. That could give you problems, but I bet we'll see quite a bit of that Baylor Shireman and Grant Nelson matchup.
A little former Dakota on Dakota action.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
My last thing I think is just, a key from you, I guess, if there's one thing that has to go right for Creighton to pull away in this game, and what has to go right for Alabama if they want to pull the upset.
Yeah, no, for Creighton, they've got to be able to slow down the guard play. I mean, Mark Sears is no joke. He's shown that, right? Averaging 20 plus, I think.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's shown that. And that's why I think that's probably the player to stop. And that's why I think you'll see so many different mismatches or I guess attempts to create mismatches. They'll try Ashworth on him, I'm sure. They'll try Alexander, they'll try Shireman, and kind of see what conglomerate works, which one person works. I don't know. But I think both of these teams are going to run the floor. I think you'll see, I don't know, like 53s put up in this game. I really think so. And so I think the key for Creighton is probably just guard play. If you can keep fresh again with guys like Francisco Farabello. You could see a Josiah Dotzler come into play if we're really running laps up and down the court now. And then for Bama to be able to pull it off, it is. I don't know. This Creighton team is good, man. But yeah, to be able to beat them, I think it's a little bit of what Colorado State did. You have to try and affect as many 3-point shots as you possibly can, and have an enforcer of the inside or a scheme that works to seal Ryan Kalkbrenner out of the paint. I mean, that's probably the toughest part. Again, for the same reason that it's so tough to go against Zach Edey. It's hard to go against anybody who's 7+, right? So that's probably the recipe. But Creighton's offense begins and ends with 3-point shots, and so that's the other one too. Have the enforcer, which again, you're probably not going to. So it's so tough to have a matchup for Ryan Kalkbrenner. So then you have to turn your attention into trying to get Creighton to miss as many shots as possible.
Yeah. I think I actually just had one, more pop.
You're good.
My head. Yeah. I this team, you mentioned all the metrics. I mean, they're 12th in offensive efficiency, 8th in defensive efficiency. And you touched on it a little bit, but is it just that? Is it sealing Kalkbrenner off and then limiting threes is kind of how you cause this team problems, because it's just there's so much balance on both ends?
Yeah, if you look at their shot chart right now, like their season long shot chart, the mid-range is non-existent. If you're shooting something from 15 feet, like you're doing something wrong in this offense. They love the rim run, whether that be using Kalkbrenner, because again, he can space the floor, he can shoot it. So you'll roll, you'll hedge your screen, and you'll anticipate the roll, and he'll just trail and pop out of it, and then bang, he can hit from deep. So that's the kind of mismatch and so you'll see a lot of guards, specifically Baylor Shireman and Trey Alexander, try and drive the lane too, when it kind of presents itself. And then everything else is from outside. Again, they do not shoot mid-range unless they have to. So yeah, I mean, it really is that. It's those two things. If you have somebody who can rim protect, and then again, if it's a night where the Jays are missing shots, that's when another team's gonna have their best chance, I think.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty much all I have. It's gonna be another difficult one with another intimidating big.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah, it should be a fun one. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time, Jon. I appreciate it.
For sure.